Good evening, dear friends, and welcome back to The Curious Case. Tell me, are you already feeling the Christmas glow, or do you prefer the quiet moments before the day begins? Let me know below, and don't forget to subscribe so our cozy little circle keeps growing. Tonight, we travel to Frostwick Hollow, a village wrapped in snow and whispers. Something happened there, something the locals aren't ready to admit. But Frostwick Hollow held a secret tonight. Winter settled over Frostwick Hollow with a quiet weight. Snow pressed against rooftops. Light glowed behind curtains. But the village felt still. Too still. Miss Marple noticed it the moment she stepped onto the lane. She paused. She listened. Nothing moved. No footsteps. No chatter. Even the sparrows kept to their branches. She knew this kind of silence. It was the kind that held something back, something unsaid, something waiting. She walked a little further, her boots pressed softly into the snow. The air carried a strange hush. She saw Mrs. Harriet Longford outside the post office. Mrs. Longford usually greeted everyone with cheerful waves, but tonight, no wave, just a stiff nod. Her eyes drifted toward the chapel, then back to Miss Marple, as if she wanted to speak, but chose not to. "Good evening," Miss Marple said gently. Mrs. Longford blinked. "Oh, yes. Evening, Miss Marple." Her voice lacked its usual warmth. She held her scarf too tightly, hands trembling just a little. Miss Marple noticed. She always noticed. Something troubled Mrs. Longford, but now was not the moment to press. Miss Marple continued along the lane. Dr. Oliver Brent emerged from his small clinic. He locked the door with slow movements, very slow, almost hesitant. He looked up, saw Miss Marple, managed a thin smile. "Cold night," he said. "Yes," she replied. "But cold alone doesn't make a village this quiet." Dr. Brent looked at the chapel too, then back at her. He adjusted his gloves. He seemed about to say something, but like Mrs. Longford, he stopped, pressed his lips together, and walked away. Miss Marple followed his gaze. The chapel stood at the center of the village. Snow around it was untouched, no recent footprints. Yet the lamps glowed inside. Someone was there. Someone keeping distance. Someone not opening the door to visitors. She walked past the green. A small figure appeared near the chapel steps. Jonah, one of the choir boys. A quiet child, usually cheerful. Tonight he looked pale. He held his music folder tight against his chest. Too tight. "Good evening, Jonah," Miss Marple said. He startled, dropped the folder slightly. "Oh, Miss Marple, I didn't see you." "You look worried," she said softly. Jonah shook his head too quickly. No, just choir practice." His voice cracked. His eyes darted to the chapel door, then back to her face. He swallowed hard. Miss Marple gave a gentle nod. "I see." She didn't push him, not yet. The boy trembled slightly. He wasn't cold. He was afraid. Jonah hurried inside. The chapel door swung behind him, not fully closed, just a sliver open. A door like that should never be left ajar in winter. Not in Frostwick Hollow. Miss Marple walked toward it, slow, quiet. She placed her hand on the edge. The hinge creaked. A faint sound came from within. Not voices, not footsteps, something else. A soft shift of weight, like someone moving in the dark. Miss Marple leaned in, listened. The stillness broke, just for a second. Something inside moved, quietly. The Frostwick Chapel stood warm against the winter night. Candles glowed along the windows. Soft light touched the wooden pews. The village had gathered. Quiet voices drifted through the air. No laughter, no easy chatter. Just low whispers. Miss Marple stepped inside. She closed the door gently. She looked around. She knew the chapel well, but the mood tonight felt different. Careful, guarded. Reverend Lionel Brooke stood near the front. He greeted villagers one by one, His smile looked thin, his eyes looked tired. He kept glancing toward the choir stalls, as if checking something, as if counting someone. Miss Marple noted it. She always noted these small things. On the left side, the choir warmed up. Simple notes, short scales, nothing cheerful, nothing loud. The boys sang without spirit. Even Philip, usually bright and eager, sang with a stiff voice. Jonah stared at his shoes. Lewis kept rubbing his hands. Miss Marple watched them for a moment. Their unease wasn't childish nerves. It was something heavier. She would ask later. But not now. At the organ sat Mr. Edwin Thorne, a quiet man. Thin shoulders, narrow face, always polite, always proper. But tonight, something was different. Miss Marple walked a bit closer. His hands moved across the keys. Slow, rigid, too rigid. Not from cold, not from lack of skill, from tension, real tension. Mr. Thorne noticed her watching. He gave a sharp nod, a forced smile. Then he returned to the organ, but his fingers trembled. Miss Marple saw it clearly. Trembling hands always meant worry, or guilt, or both. Near the choir stood Mr. Percival Hartley, the choir master. Tall, firm voice, known for strict standards. He checked each boy's robe, checked each folder, checked each place in line. But even he didn't look settled. His face held a tightness, like he expected a mistake, or a threat. Miss Marple's gaze followed his movements. He kept touching his coat pocket, as if making sure something was still there, and every time he touched it, his eyes shifted toward the back of the chapel. Miss Marple turned too. She saw a man sitting alone. Far corner, dark coat, hands folded, watching quietly. She didn't know him, not from the village, not from nearby towns. His posture was calm, too calm. But his attention was sharp, very sharp. He watched Mr. Hartley, only Mr. Hartley. Miss Marple observed him a little longer. He didn't blink much, didn't look away, didn't join the whispers. He wasn't here for the service. He was here for someone, and that someone was the choir master. Reverend Brooke rang a small handbell. The villagers sat. The choir lined up. The organ began a gentle tune. The service would start soon. Miss Marple took her seat. She folded her hands. She breathed slowly. She knew the signs. Something was stirring beneath this quiet evening, something the village didn't see yet. But she did. Her eyes drifted back to the stranger, then to Mr. Hartley. The stranger leaned forward, just a touch, just enough to reveal his intent. Someone watched Hartley too closely. The chapel settled into a quiet rhythm. People shifted in their seats, voices lowered, candles hummed faintly. Miss Marple watched the small details. They were always more important than the large ones. Mr. Percival Hartley stood near the choir rail. He checked the boys again, straightened a robe, adjusted a collar. But his hands were tense, his jaw stiff, his eyes restless. He looked anxious, very anxious. Miss Marple studied him carefully. Hartley was known for order. He liked things neat. He liked things predictable. But this was more than simple worry about a performance. This was deeper. Something had unsettled him long before she entered the chapel. Mr. Edwin Thorne kept close to the organ. He avoided Hartley's eyes. Every time Hartley looked his way, Thorne pretended to check a sheet, or adjust a pedal, or shift on the bench. Anything to avoid meeting that gaze. Miss Marple noticed the pattern. It repeated 3 times. Never accidental. She knew people rarely avoided someone without reason. A quarrel, perhaps. A disagreement, or something heavier. Something that involved guilt, or fear, or both. She looked at the choir boys next. Young faces, soft voices, nervous hands, especially Lewis. He stood at the end of the row. He fidgeted non-stop, first with his sleeves, then his collar, then his folder, then the hem of his robe. His eyes kept darting toward Hartley. Miss Marple leaned slightly forward. She watched his breathing. Quick, uneven. Lewis wasn't cold. He wasn't bored. He was frightened of something, or someone. Jonah whispered something to him. Lewis shook his head. He didn't speak. He only pressed his lips together. Miss Marple saw the tension between the boys, a shared worry, something they had seen earlier, something they didn't know how to describe. She shifted her gaze to the back. The stranger sat there, still, quiet, focused. His eyes followed Hartley with a calm intensity. He didn't look at the choir. He didn't look at the villagers. Only Hartley, always Hartley. Miss Marple studied his posture, not aggressive, not gentle, controlled, measuring, like a man taking notes without paper. She had seen eyes like that before, years ago. Different place, different people. A quarrel in St. Mildred's parish, a heated exchange, a quiet threat, and a man who watched from a distance, just like this stranger. The memory returned with surprising clarity. Two men arguing behind the vestry, one trembling, one calm. The calm one watched the trembling one all evening. He said nothing, he did nothing, but the tension had been unmistakable. Something unspoken between them, something heavy. Tonight felt the same kind of silence, same kind of glances, same kind of unease spreading through the room. Miss Marple folded her hands. She breathed softly. Her mind traced every small detail. Hartley's anxiety, Thorne's avoidance, Lewis's trembling, the stranger's gaze, the faint tension linking all four. None of them spoke about it. None of them wanted to. But the truth sat among them like a guest with no seat. Something unspoken hung in the air. The chapel settled. The choir stood ready. Villagers held their breath. Reverend Brooke lifted his hand. The service began. A low hum rose from the organ. Mr. Thorne pressed the keys, slow, steady, trying to keep calm, trying to pretend nothing was wrong. Miss Marple watched the boys. Lewis swallowed hard. Philip shifted in place. Jonah looked at the door. Unease touched every movement. Hartley stepped forward. He raised his hand to guide the first note. His voice cleared softly. He forced a small smile. It faded quickly. Then the first change came. The lights dimmed. Not fully, just enough to make people blink. A murmur rippled through the pews. Miss Marple turned her head slightly. She listened. Lights rarely dimmed without cause, not in Frostwick Chapel. The second change followed. The bells stuttered above them. A broken rhythm. Short, sharp, wrong. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. The bell rope didn't move, which meant someone had tampered with the mechanism. Earlier, quietly. Before she could think further, the organ faltered. A low choke, a missed note. Thorne's hands stiffened. His foot froze on the pedal. He looked terrified, truly terrified. Hartley turned toward him, only slightly, but enough to show confusion. And then, something else. A flicker of pain. Miss Marple rose half an inch from her seat. Not enough to alarm anyone, just enough to watch closely. Her eyes traced Hartley's face. His breath caught, his hand trembled. He stepped back, stumbled, raised his hand again, but his fingers curled inward. Slow, tight, uncontrolled. Then it happened. Sudden. Quiet at first. Hartley collapsed mid-gesture. His robe brushed the choir rail. Then his body hit the floor. A scream tore through the chapel. Sharp, immediate. Lewis cried out first. Someone in the back gasped. Reverend Brooke froze in place. Miss Marple moved at once, not rushing, not panicking, just steady, purposeful. She reached Hartley's side before anyone else. She knelt. She observed. She did not touch him yet. She never touched anything until she understood what she saw. His hands were tight, fingers curled unnaturally, a sign she had seen before. Not illness, not fear, something chemical. A faint smell rose from him. Sharp, metal-like, not on his clothes, on his skin. Another clue. Miss Marple leaned closer. She looked at the book beside him. His music folder had fallen open. One page showed a dark smear. Not ink, not dirt, something else. A candle nearby had dripped wax onto his sleeve. Fresh wax, still warm. but the candle had not been moved, which meant someone moved him, or something brushed past him. Seconds before he fell, voices around her blurred. Panic rose. Footsteps echoed, chairs scraped. Miss Marple stayed calm. She let her eyes take in every detail. Hand, smell, book, wax, position, timing. She already knew this was no fainting spell, no simple collapse. This had intent behind it, careful intent. Reverend Brooke knelt beside her. "Is he?" Miss Marple looked up, quiet, certain. Hartley was gone. Dr. Oliver Brent pushed through the crowd quickly. He knelt beside Mr. Percival Hartley. His hands moved with habit, firm, precise. He checked the pulse, checked the eyes, checked the breath. Miss Marple stepped back just enough to give him space, but her eyes stayed on the small details. They always did. After a few seconds, Dr. Brent looked up. His face was pale. "Not natural," he whispered. His voice barely reached her, but she heard every word. Reverend Brooke exhaled sharply. A few villagers cried. Lewis hid his face. Jonah trembled. "Please give room," Dr. Brent said. But no one moved far. The shock held them, held everyone except Miss Marple. The chapel door opened. Cold air slipped in. Constable Neil Piper entered first. Inspector Grant Havers followed. Both men scanned the room. Their eyes found the fallen choirmaster. Constable Piper spoke quietly. "When did it happen?" "Just now," Reverend Brooke said, "during the opening hymn." Inspector Havers crouched down beside Dr. Brent. He didn't touch the body. He watched. He listened. He measured the silence in the room. Dr. Brent said it again, louder this time. "Unnatural." The words settled like frost, clear, cold. Miss Marple began her quiet walk around the nearest pews. People thought she was simply stepping aside, but she was looking, always looking. First, the hymn book. It lay open where Hartley had stood, but it wasn't his usual copy. Different cover, slightly worn corners, a page folded at the wrong place. No one else noticed. She leaned a little. The book smelled faintly of something sharp. Not dust, not ink. Something else. A scent she had learned over years of village life. A scent she never ignored. Next, she noticed the small sprig near the corner of the folder. A green piece. Delicate, out of place in winter. She bent slightly, not touching it, just seeing. A poisonous plant often disguised in festive arrangements. Again, unnoticed by everyone else. Her eyes drifted toward the dark mark on one of the pages. A smear. Thin, uneven, not a spill, not dirt, not wax. Something brushed there accidentally, or intentionally. She moved closer to Hartley's sleeve. Dr. Brent shifted to give her a view. A subtle hint of metal reached her. A sharp smell. Quick, fading, but clear enough for someone who knew such things. She didn't speak. Miss Marple rarely spoke too early. People revealed more when they believed she knew less. Inspector Havers stood. "We'll need to clear the chapel," he said, but his voice carried doubt. He didn't yet see what she saw. He didn't yet know where to look. Miss Marple folded her hands gently. Her gaze lingered on the hymn book. Then the sprig. Then the mark. Then Hartley's stiff fingers. Each clue whispering quietly. Each clue waiting. She looked around the chapel. Everyone stared at the body. Everyone except her. She looked at the truth forming around it. No one else noticed. Miss Marple stepped away from the adults. The villagers crowded around Inspector Havers. Everyone talked at once. Voices overlapped. Fear spread quickly. Miss Marple knew better than to join that noise. Answers rarely lived in loud corners. They lived in quiet ones. She turned toward the choir boys. They stood near the front pew. Close enough to see everything, far enough to stay unnoticed. Young faces, uneasy eyes. Philip stood stiffly. Jonah clutched his folder. Lewis kept rubbing his hands. Miss Marple approached slowly. Gentle steps, gentle expression, no pressure, only patience. Philip looked up first. His lips trembled. He tried to speak, stopped, tried again. "It's all right," Miss Marple said softly. "I only want to understand what you saw." Philip exhaled. "There was an argument, miss," he whispered, "before the service." "Who argued?" she asked. Philip glanced toward the organ. "Mr. Hartley and Mr. Thorne." Miss Marple nodded once. No surprise. She had seen the tension. She waited for more. Philip swallowed. Mr. Hartley said something about the money and about no more excuses. Then he lowered his eyes. Miss Marple's mind moved quietly. Money, excuses, a quarrel between the choirmaster and the organist. Another layer added. Jonah stepped closer. His voice was small, barely above a breath. "Miss, I saw something else." She turned to him. "Yes, Jonah." He held his music folder tighter. It almost bent under his grip. "Mr. Hartley dropped a paper," he said. "It fell on the choir step. He picked it up fast, really fast." "What kind of paper?" Miss Marple asked. Jonah shook his head. "I don't know, but he looked scared." Scared. That word mattered. People dropped things when startled, but they rarely snatched them up with fear unless the paper meant something, or threatened something. Miss Marple gave him a soft nod. "You did well to notice." Lewis had stayed silent until now. He stood a little behind the other two, but his shaking hands gave him away. "Lewis?" she said gently. He hesitated, looked at the door, then at the floor, then at her. I saw someone touch the music stand," he whispered, "before anyone else came in." Miss Marple leaned slightly forward. "Who?" Lewis opened his mouth, closed it, looked toward the back pew. She followed his gaze. The stranger sat there again. Still, quiet, watching everything, watching the boys now too. Lewis swallowed. "I don't know his name, miss, but he wasn't supposed to be here." Miss Marple studied the boy. "Did he move the stand?" Lewis nodded quickly. "Yes." He touched the top, and something fell off. He picked it up before anyone saw. Another small piece slid into place. She had seen tampering signs earlier. This confirmed it. Philip lifted his head again. "And someone came early, miss? Before us? Before Mr. Hartley?" "Who?" Miss Marple asked. Philip looked around nervously. All three boys leaned closer. Fear touched their voices. One boy whispered, "Miss, someone was angry." Inspector Havers asked the villagers to step back. Constable Piper closed the aisle. Voices dropped to whispers. Fear settled into every corner. Miss Marple remained near the choir stalls. Her eyes moved slowly, searching, connecting. She had learned to trust small things. Small things always told the truth. Reverend Brooke approached her. His hands shook slightly, not from cold, from worry. "Miss Marple," he said, "there is something I should show you." She followed him to the vestry, a small room, quiet, shadowed. He reached behind a stack of music folders. He pulled out a thin book, old, brown cover, edges worn. "A ledger," he whispered. "Hartley kept it hidden." Miss Marple held it carefully. She did not open it fully. She turned only a few pages. Neat handwriting, dates, amounts, notes. She read a line. Music fund. She read the next line. Repair costs. Then another. Monthly collection. Then she saw the changes. Numbers crossed out. Numbers rewritten. Gaps where entries should be. Reverend Brooke spoke quietly. "Hartley told me he had concerns. He believed someone was taking money. He wanted to speak to the council after Christmas." Miss Marple looked at him steadily. "Did he tell you who?" Brooke shook his head. He said he needed proof first. Proof. A dangerous word when money went missing. A word people feared. A word that could push someone to act. Miss Marple closed the ledger gently. She knew this kind of pattern. A quiet complaint, a hidden book, a threat to reveal someone. And then, a sudden death. Constable Piper entered. He held a small envelope. "Found this in Hartley's coat pocket," he said. Inspector Havers opened it. A single sheet. Short message. Written in haste. "Enough. Tonight we talk. No more delays." Miss Marple read it once. The message was not friendly. It held pressure. A quiet threat. Someone wanted answers before the service. Someone wanted Hartley cornered. Someone did not want him speaking to the council. She traced the timing carefully. Hartley planned to expose someone. A quarrel took place earlier. A stranger arrived before the choir. Thorne avoided Hartley's eyes. Lewis saw someone touch the music stand. Pieces shifted. They formed a shape, not clear yet, but forming. Reverend Brooke hesitated. "There were tensions this month," he said softly. "Who with?" Miss Marple asked. Brooke sighed. "Mr. Thorne, they disagreed about spending, about programs, about new choir costs." Jealousy added a new note. Thorne wanted more influence. Hartley refused. Old grudges could grow quickly in small places. Miss Marple had seen it before. But she did not jump to conclusions. She never did. Money alone did not explain tampered candles, or a poisoned sprig, or the stranger's steady gaze. There were more layers, more hands in this than one. Miss Marple held the ledger again. She ran a finger over the missing entries. The truth was there, just not arranged yet. She stepped back into the chapel. Her mind worked quietly, carefully. The motive had begun to show itself, but the whole story wasn't clear. Inspector Grant Havers stood near the organ bench. Mr. Edwin Thorne sat stiffly. His hands rested on his knees, too still, too controlled, as if he feared they might betray him. "Mr. Thorne," Inspector Havers began, "I need your account of this evening." Thorne nodded, a small, jerky nod. Yes, of course." But his voice cracked. Miss Marple heard it clearly. "When did you last speak to Mr. Hartley?" the inspector asked. Thorne swallowed. "This afternoon. Briefly. Nothing important." A lie. Miss Marple saw it instantly, not from his words, from the way he blinked, too fast, too deliberate. A man trying to hold something back. Inspector Havers continued. "Philip says you argued." Thorne flinched. No, that was nothing. Just a misunderstanding." Another lie. His shoulders tightened. His left hand shook. Just for a moment. "About money," the inspector pressed. Thorne looked away. To the window. To the pews. Anywhere but at the inspector. I don't know what he told people," he said. Half answer, half truth. A man trying to shield himself without revealing the hole beneath. Inspector Havers stepped closer. "You avoided Mr. Hartley during rehearsal." Thorne wiped his palms on his trousers. "I was focused on the organ. I always am." Miss Marple tilted her head. Focused men did not tremble, nor did they glance at the door 3 times in 1 minute. Havers pointed to the music stand. "Lewis says someone touched it before the service. Was it you?" Thorne shook his head quickly. "No, I never touched it. Not once." Another lie. Too quick, too practiced. And his eyes drifted again. Always drifting, never meeting the inspector's gaze. "Did Mr. Hartley confront you about the ledger?" Havers asked. Thorne froze. Just for a breath. Then he forced a laugh. A thin one, a weak one. "I don't know anything about that." But his knee bounced. One small tap against the wooden bench. Miss Marple saw it. She saw everything. Inspector Havers leaned back. "Did you arrive before the choir?" Thorne hesitated. "Too long. Far too long. I came on time. Just on time." Miss Marple noted the pause. Guilt often lived inside hesitation. Truth lived in steady answers. Thorne had neither. She stepped a little closer, not to join the questioning, only to observe. Her voice stayed quiet. Her eyes stayed sharp. Thorne rubbed the side of his thumb. a nervous habit, one he used whenever a question touched too close to truth. Inspector Hivers folded his arms. "You need to understand something, Mr. Thorne," he said calmly. "Hartley didn't collapse by chance. Someone helped that along." Thorne's breath hitched. His face tightened. His gaze darted again toward the back of the chapel, toward the stranger. Miss Marple saw the connection, a small thread, thin but present. Thorne was involved, yes, but not in the way others assumed. His lies covered something, but his fear, that pointed somewhere else. Miss Marple breathed softly. "He's hiding something," she whispered to herself, "but not everything." Miss Marple stepped away from Mr. Thorne. She had heard enough for the moment. Too many lies, too many hesitations, but not enough motive, not enough clarity. Her eyes drifted toward the back pew. The stranger sat there again, very still, hands folded, eyes lowered, as if trying to blend into the wood itself. Miss Marple studied him quietly. She had seen him earlier, standing near the chapel gate, not entering, just waiting, watching the door, watching people arrive. He had tried to approach Mr. Hartley before the service. She remembered the quick exchange. Hartley shook his head, raised a hand to stop him, and walked away. The stranger looked frustrated, then resigned, and after Hartley collapsed, the stranger fled, not running, not drawing attention, just slipping toward the side aisle, leaving before anyone could stop him. A man comfortable with exits, a man who planned them. Now he sat again, composed, quiet, almost too quiet. Miss Marple walked toward him, not directly, not with urgency, just a slow, gentle path, the kind that made people open up without knowing they had. He lifted his head as she approached. His eyes were sharp, calm, but not empty. They held something, something heavy. "Mr. Rowan Clark," she said softly. His eyebrows rose slightly. "You know my name?" "I listen," she replied. "Villagers mention things when they worry." He nodded once, a cautious nod. "Yes, I suppose they would." Miss Marple sat in the pew beside him. Not close, not far, just enough to show she wasn't afraid, and wasn't accusing. "You spoke to Mr. Hartley earlier," she said. He took a slow breath. "I tried." "But he refused?" Clark nodded. "Yes, he told me he was too busy. He told me to wait until after the service." "And you didn't wait," she said quietly. "You left." Clark's eyes shifted. "I panicked. I shouldn't have. But the moment he fell, I knew how it would look." "Why would it look any particular way?" Miss Marple asked. Her voice stayed soft. Clark looked down at his hands. "I came to speak about the finances, the missing money, the accusations." Miss Marple's thoughts tightened. Another thread. The ledger again. "You knew about the music fund?" she asked. Clark nodded. "I was sent to review parish accounts, quietly. I didn't want trouble. I only wanted the truth. Hartley knew that, but he didn't want the matter brought higher." "Why?" Miss Marple asked. Clark hesitated. A long hesitation. He feared someone would retaliate. He said he was already being pressured. Pressured. A dangerous word, one that often led to desperate choices. Clark rubbed his thumb against his palm. "I shouldn't have left," he said. "But when he collapsed, I thought people would blame me." Miss Marple studied him carefully. His fear was real, but fear alone didn't explain the early arrival, or the attempt to speak to Hartley, or the quiet slips between corners of the chapel. He wasn't part of the village. He wasn't part of the choir. He wasn't even part of the congregation. He was here for one reason, only one. Miss Marple folded her hands. Her eyes stayed steady. He wasn't here by accident. The chapel slowly emptied. Villagers stepped outside in small groups. Inspector Havers instructed Constable Piper to guard the door. Dr. Brent remained with the body. Miss Marple used the quiet moment to move. She always preferred stillness. Stillness revealed more than noise ever could. She walked toward the bell rope first. It hung neatly, too neatly. No recent movement showed on the fibers, yet the bell above had stuttered. Badly. She slipped through the small side stairwell. The steps creaked, cold air drifted down. She reached the bell chamber. One glance told her enough. A key inside the mechanism was broken, snapped cleanly, not from age, not from wear. This kind of break came from pressure, from a deliberate hand, earlier, before anyone entered the chapel. Miss Marple touched nothing. She only observed. Then she turned. She descended to the main hall again. Her next stop was the nearest candle stand, a row of small brass holders, wax still warm, uneven, dripped in a pattern that didn't match the usual tilt. Someone had moved the candles, or moved something near them, before the service. She checked the wick on one. It was bent, not naturally, bent by someone adjusting it. A small change, but intentional. She walked to the front pew. 2 hymn books sat side by side. She opened one, a normal copy. She opened the second, not normal. Different handwriting inside, different numbering. And the page marked for tonight's hymn was wrong. Wrong page, wrong fold. Someone wanted Hartley to open the wrong book, or to pick up the wrong copy, or to place his hands on something specific at the right moment. Miss Marple closed the book gently. She didn't disturb the crease. She didn't disturb the scent. She let it remain as it was. She stepped around to the choir rail. Near the corner, hidden behind a carved beam, she saw it. A small leaf, green, sharp-edged, out of place in winter. She leaned closer, not touching, just examining. She recognized it from many years of village incidents, a plant often used for decorations, but dangerous when handled incorrectly, more dangerous when crushed. A plant that could affect the nerves, or the breath, depending on contact. She looked at Hartley's sleeve again. She remembered the faint metal smell, the curled fingers. This leaf explained part of it. Not all of it, but enough to show intent. She turned to the music stand next. Lewis had mentioned it, touched before anyone arrived. She inspected it closely. The top edge showed a fresh scratch, a small mark, thin, bright. Something metal had pressed against it, or scraped it, recently. And the base of the stand sat 2 inches off its usual position. She knew because the stand left a faint mark on the floor, a cleaner strip, a small rectangle. The stand did not match that rectangle now. Someone moved it. Someone positioned it. Someone knew exactly where Hartley would stand, where he would reach, where his hand would land. Miss Marple stepped back. She looked around the entire chapel. Bell, candles, books, leaf, stand. None of this was chance. None of this was clumsy. This was arranged, layer by layer, piece by piece, with steady hands. Someone staged everything. Morning arrived quietly in Frostwick Hollow. Snow lay still across the chapel roof. No footprints marked the path. No sign of visitors. But when Reverend Lionel Brooke unlocked the chapel door, he froze. A small box sat on the altar, neat, centered, perfectly placed. Miss Marple entered moments later. Reverend Brooke waved her forward. His hands shook. "Miss Marple, this wasn't here last night." She walked toward the altar. Slow, calm. Her steps softened by the carpet. She stopped in front of the box. Plain wood. Simple clasp. No dust. Someone placed it recently. She opened it gently. Inside, she saw 3 items. First, Hartley's glasses case, the one missing from his coat, the one he always kept with him, the one he dropped once during rehearsal and quickly retrieved. Now it sat here, untouched. Second, a torn ledger page. Miss Marple recognized the handwriting. Hartley's. Numbers scribbled. Names half-written. 2 lines scratched out, 1 line circled. She leaned closer. The circled line showed a date. Yesterday. Next to it, a short note in Hartley's script. Confront tonight. Miss Marple folded her hands gently. That word again. Confront. Always dangerous. Third, a small warning note, written in rush, black ink, uneven strokes. It read, Stop digging. This ends now. Reverend Brooke gasped softly. Someone is threatening us. Miss Marple shook her head slightly. Not us. Only Hartley, and perhaps whoever might take his place. Inspector Havers arrived soon after. Constable Piper followed him. Both stood over the box. Both looked confused. Havers frowned. Why leave this here? Miss Marple did not answer yet. She studied the items again, the case, the page, the note. 3 pieces of a story, arranged with care, arranged with intent. She lifted nothing. She touched nothing. Her eyes traveled slowly from one clue to the next. Hartley kept a secret ledger. Money missing. A confrontation planned, a threat received, and now a box placed on the altar overnight. But Miss Marple knew something important. People who acted in panic left mess. People who acted in fear acted quickly. But this box was neat, deliberate, centered. Someone wanted attention. Or someone wanted misdirection. Either way, the placement was part of the message. Inspector Havers turned to her. What do you think, Miss Marple? She spoke softly. Someone returned these items to guide us, but guidance can lead truthfully or falsely. Reverend Brooke looked worried. You mean this could be a trap? Miss Marple didn't answer directly. She continued observing the altar. She looked at the way the box sat. She looked at the way the page had been folded. She looked at the creases on the warning note. Each detail whispered a different intention, a different pressure, a different story. She breathed slowly, thoughtfully. The chapel remained silent, too silent. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. Why leave it here? She murmured. Now? The chapel felt colder now, not from the weather, from the truth slowly gathering in the air. Miss Marple stood near the front pew. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, not to rest, to organize. She always sorted puzzles in her mind before she spoke aloud. She began with the timing. The darkness came first, too sudden, too precise. Lights did not dim on their own, not in Frostwick Hollow. Then the bell, the stutter in its rhythm, that broken key, clean break, deliberate. Someone wanted confusion at the exact moment Hartley raised his hand. Next, the hymn book. The wrong copy in the right place. A folded page marking the wrong hymn. A mark on the edge. A faint scent. Miss Marple knew someone meant Hartley to touch it. At that moment, right before he fell. She moved to the argument. Philip heard it. Jonah confirmed the tension. Thorne denied everything, yet trembled. Money, excuses, pressure. Someone felt threatened. Someone feared exposure. Miss Marple turned toward the back pew. She remembered Rowan Clark's expression. Not guilt. Fear. Real fear. He tried to warn Hartley. Hartley refused. Clark left before the danger fell. Not because he was guilty, but because he expected blame. A man running from misunderstanding, not from murder. She shifted to the ledger entries. Missing funds. Altered numbers. Crossed out lines. Hartley's handwriting grew tighter toward the last pages, a sign of someone under stress, someone nearing a confrontation, especially the circled date. Yesterday. He planned to reveal everything soon, but the letter in his coat pocket changed that. Enough. Tonight we talk. No more delays. The tone was clear, a threat wrapped in impatience. Miss Marple recalled the sprig she found, poisonous, hidden near the choir rail, placed with purpose, placed where Hartley would reach during rehearsal or service, placed before the villagers arrived. She thought of the music stand, moved slightly. Angle changed, edge scratched. A detail Lewis saw, a detail no adult noticed. She traced each piece quietly. In her mind, each clue formed a line, none of them random, none of them careless. Each one planned, placed, timed. The darkness, the bell, the hymn book, the sprig, the stand, the quarrel, the missing money, the warning note, the stranger's fear, the organist's lies, each thread wrapped around the same moment, the moment Hartley raised his hand to begin the hymn. A simple gesture, a familiar motion, one he had done hundreds of times. But last night, that gesture triggered everything. Miss Marple opened her eyes. She looked at the altar, then the pews, then the organ, then the door. She breathed in slowly, a soft, steady breath. All the threads pointed in one direction, toward one plan, toward one person, toward one truth. All threads point to one truth. Everyone gathered inside Frostwick Chapel, Reverend Brooke, Mr. Edwin Thorne, Dr. Brent, Rowan Clark, Hartley's choir boys, Constable Piper, Inspector Havers, Mrs. Longford, Lewis, Jonah, Philip. Miss Marple stood near the front, hands folded, voice calm, eyes gentle. "Thank you all for coming," she said softly. "This will not take long. Everything has become quite clear." The group shifted, some anxious, some impatient, some scared. Miss Marple began. "Mr. Hartley did not die from shock or from sudden illness. He died because someone prepared the chapel for him. Every change was planned." She pointed toward the hymn stand. The hymn books were swapped. Hartley was meant to touch the wrong one. It carried residue from a poisonous leaf. Only a small amount, but enough. Eyes widened, murmurs began. She lifted a hand. And the bell key, broken deliberately. Not to harm Hartley, but to distract everyone. The stuttering bell made people look upward, not inward. It created confusion at the exact moment the poison began to act. Inspector Havers nodded slowly. "Someone prepared the bell before we arrived." Miss Marple continued. "Yes, and the candles moved, adjusted, their angles shifted. Someone needed a few seconds alone at the front. Someone who knew where Hartley always stood." She turned toward the choir rail. The sprig of leaf was hidden where his sleeve brushed just before the hymn began. That contact completed the plan. Reverend Brooke swallowed. "You mean he was poisoned twice?" "Once on the book," Miss Marple replied, "and once on the stand." The second contact ensured the effect. Rowan Clark stepped forward. "But why? And who would do such a thing?" Miss Marple looked at him kindly. "You knew part of the answer, Mr. Clark. The ledger told the rest. Money missing, entries altered. Hartley planned to expose someone last night. He circled the date. He wrote, 'Confront tonight.' Someone saw it. Someone panicked. Someone acted." Mr. Thorne flinched. His eyes dropped. Miss Marple's voice stayed soft. "Mr. Thorne lied. Yes, but he lied out of fear. He feared dismissal. He feared blame. He feared the argument Hartley had with him would be misunderstood." Thorne looked up, stunned. You know I didn't do it?" "Yes," Miss Marple said. "You hid small things, but not deadly things." The room tightened, breaths held. She shifted her gaze. Everything returns to the person who moved freely, the person who handled candles, the person who often adjusted hymn books, the person who arrived early, the person Hartley trusted least, the person who had access to the ledger and time to tear out a page. She paused. "Mrs. Longford." The room gasped. Mrs. Longford froze. Her hands dropped to her sides. Miss Marple continued. "You controlled the fund. You hid the missing money. Hartley discovered it. You panicked. You set a scene with many clues, hoping suspicion would fall on Mr. Thorne or on Mr. Clark. And the box you placed on the altar. That was your attempt to guide the police away from yourself." Mrs. Longford stepped back. Her face drained. Miss Marple's tone stayed gentle. "Poison on the book, poison on the stand, false clues everywhere, but small details stay honest. And those details led me to you." Inspector Havers reached for his cuffs. Mrs. Longford's lips trembled. Her eyes darted to the door. One person turned pale. Frostwick Hollow grew quiet again. Snow settled over the roofs. Paths softened. Windows glowed with simple comfort. Families walked home slowly after the long night. Voices lowered. Worry eased. The village breathed again. Miss Marple stood near the chapel door. She watched the snow drift. She held her scarf a little closer, her face calm, her thoughts steady. Human nature remains the same. Even in winter, she murmured. People hide fear, people hide guilt, and sometimes people hide goodness too. Inspector Havers thanked her. Reverend Brooke bowed his head in gratitude. The choir boys waved shyly. Miss Marple gave a small nod. "Order returns," she whispered, "and so does peace." But as she turned to leave, Constable Piper approached quietly. "Miss Marple, this was found in the vestry, addressed to you." A single envelope, unopened. Yet one letter still waited. "Thank you, dear friends, for joining me tonight on the curious case. Tell me, which clue did you catch first? And where are you listening from this evening? I always enjoy reading your thoughts, so do leave a comment below. Thank you for being here, for every story, every quiet moment together. And don't forget, tomorrow brings another mystery waiting to unfold. Tomorrow, another kettle will boil. Soft music fades. Morning settled over Miss Marple's cottage. A new envelope lay on her table. No name, no seal, just quiet intent. She opened it gently. Inside, a single handwritten line. He wasn't acting alone. Miss Marple paused. Her eyes lifted. Another secret waited. Night settled over Frostwick Hollow. The lanes grew quiet, but someone stood watching from the edge of the road. A low whisper drifted out. Another truth, nearly uncovered. Miss Marple would hear of it soon. The next mystery had already begun.